Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a really high-speed look at the legal foundations of corporate financing.
Right.
We're not talking about just any old loan. We are unpacking how major corporations structure their debt and, maybe more importantly, what happens when money runs out.
We're really looking at the architecture of risk, but from the lender's perspective. Our whole mission today is to cut right through the dense legal jargon.
Yeah, get to the core of it.
Exactly. And give you that essential contrast between owning something and just being owed something. We'll be focusing heavily on these critical mechanisms called company charges.
Okay.
This knowledge is, and I mean this, it's the key to assessing who legally gets first dibs on a company's assets when, the fight for survival begins.
That's it exactly. So for you listening, the mission is to really get your head around the big differences between share capital and debentures, and then lock onto the details of fixed charges versus floating charges.
It sounds technical.
It is. But trust me, if you've ever wondered why one creditor in a bankruptcy gets paid back 100% and another gets, well, nothing, the answer is almost always in the legal priority of these charges. It's the difference between a secure investment and an empty promise.
It really is.
So let's start at the very, very beginning. Every business needs capital to grow, to hire, to buy things. And they've basically got two ways to get that money.
Right. Two main paths.
They can sell a piece of the company itself, that's equity, or they can borrow money, which is debt financing or loan capital. What really defines that core split?
Well, it's the difference between being a partner and being a landlord. I think that's the easiest way to see it. Share capital is real ownership.
Okay.
When a company issues shares, they are literally giving up a slice of the pie. The shareholder, the equity holder, is now an owner. They share in the risk, but also the potential reward. But if it all goes south...
Oh, last in line.
The very last in line to get paid. They betting on the future, knowing they might lose everything.
Right, and debt.
Debt, or loan capital, is the complete flip side. It represents an absolute obligation. When you lend a company money, they take on a legal promise to repay that principal, plus the interest, on a very fixed schedule.
And that obligation exists no matter what, doesn't it?
No matter what. It doesn't matter if the company is profitable or losing money hand over fist. The obligation to pay the creditor remains absolute. That just makes the creditor's position fundamentally safer than the shareholders.
And for this, we're focusing on a specific legal instrument. It's not just a handshake deal. When we're talking about big corporate debt, we talk about debentures. Why is that term so important?
A debenture is it's a formal written acknowledgement of that debt. It's often issued under the company's official seal.
So it's very official.
It has to be, because often a company isn't just borrowing from one bank. They might be raising money from lots of different places, maybe even the public market. The debenture standardizes that debt. It's a formal, often tradable promise to pay.
A tradable instrument. That makes sense. Now, tie that back to the rights. You said shareholders have rights.
The rights are completely different, starkly different. Shareholders, the owners, they get voting rights. They go to meetings. They can influence who's on the board.
They have a say.
They have a say. Debenture holders, though, they're creditors. They have no say in corporate strategy. They don't care who the CEO is, really. Their right is purely financial.
The right to be repaid.
The right to be repaid, the principal and the interest exactly as agreed. If the company is being run into the ground, the debenture holder isn't thinking about changing the board. They are thinking, does this company have enough assets left to pay me back?
That makes perfect sense. So if I'm the lender, the debenture holder, my biggest fear is the company collapsing before I'm repaid. This brings us to how I protect myself. The security mechanism, the company charges.
That's the critical link. A company charge is the legal claim a lender puts over a company's assets to make sure their debenture is secured.
So it's collateral.
It's collateral. If the company defaults, the lender has a legal right to seize and sell that specific asset to get their money back. It elevates the lender from just being an unsecured creditor, waiting in line, to a secured creditor who has a designated piece of the pie set aside just for them.
Okay, so let's unpack this security. The sources define two main types of charges that run this whole system: fixed charges and floating charges. Let's start with the one that gives a lender the most peace of mind, the fixed charge.
The fixed charge is security that's attached to specific, static, easily identifiable assets. Think of things the company holds for the long term.
Like a building.
A factory building, a specific piece of heavy machinery, a big printing press, something like that.
It really sounds like a corporate mortgage.
Yeah.
The asset is sort of nailed down for the lender.
That's a great analogy. The key legal effect is that the asset is ring-fenced from the moment the charge is created. The company cannot sell it, lease it, or use it for another loan without the express written permission of the creditor holding that fixed charge.
Wow.
It's legally tied to that one debt. It gives the creditor maximum control and therefore the lowest risk.
That is incredibly solid security. The asset is stable, its value is relatively predictable.
Exactly. It provides stability in the middle of all the chaos of an insolvency. The bank that funded the company's headquarters, if they have a fixed charge, they know that building is theirs to sell if the company defaults. It doesn't matter what happens to inventory or cash flow.
Okay, but here's where it gets more complex, and I think, honestly, more ingenious. The floating charge. A fixed charge is great for a building, but how on earth do you secure debt against assets that are meant to be constantly changing?
The floating charge solves a fundamental business problem. I mean, a company can't operate if it has to ask for permission every single time it wants to sell a t-shirt or buy a new box of screws.
Of course not.
So the floating charge is designed to sort of float over a constantly changing pool of assets, circulating assets.
Give me some examples. What are we talking about?
The classic examples are inventory, so all the stock on the shelves, raw materials, or the stream of accounts receivable. That's the money owed to the company by its customers.
Right, things that are in constant motion.
Vital for day-to-day business. The charge exists over them, but it doesn't stop the company from using them. The company can sell inventory, collect its debts, buy new stock, all while this charge just hovers above the whole pool.
That operational freedom is striking. But if the company can just sell off the stock that is supposed to be my collateral, how does a lender ever sleep at night? It feels so much riskier than a fixed charge.
Oh, it is. It is inherently riskier, and that's why the value of the collateral is ultimately uncertain. The lender's comfort comes from a concept called crystallization.
Crystallization.
The floating charge is basically a dormant claim. It's sleeping until a specified event happens. Usually that's a default on the loan, a major breach of the agreement, or the company officially starting insolvency proceedings.
So that's the trigger moment. Can you walk us through what that actually looks like?
Sure. Imagine a big manufacturer. They have a floating charge over all their inventory, thousands of items. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the bank sends a formal notice of default. That notice triggers the crystallization clause.
And the charge stops floating.
Instantly. At 2 p.m. on the dot, the charge stops floating and it locks down onto whatever assets are in that pool at that exact moment.
So it becomes a fixed charge, basically.
In effect, yes. Any inventory sold at 2:01 is off limits. The pool of assets is immediately frozen as collateral for that creditor. The operational freedom the company had just seconds before, it's gone.
That makes the floating charge a fascinating legal tool. It lets the company breathe and do business, which is good for everyone.
Yeah.
But the lender is exposed. The company could run down that asset pool right before crystallization. The collateral value is a moving target.
That is the trade-off. And that unpredictability is precisely why fixed charges generally have a higher legal priority, even though the floating charge is such a brilliant invention for financing working capital.
Which brings us perfectly to our next section, the battle for the assets. Because when a company becomes insolvent, the music stops. And there are usually multiple lenders, some with fixed charges, some with floating. Who gets paid first? This is all about priority and the legal requirement of registration.
Priority is absolutely everything in a liquidation. The basic rule, the foundational rule, is simple. Fixed charges typically rank higher than floating charges.
Okay.
So if there's a fixed charge over the factory and a floating charge over the inventory, the lender with the fixed charge on the factory gets paid first from the sale of that factory.
But priority isn't just about the type of charge, it's also completely about timing. And that timing is enforced by a really strict legal procedure. Registration, what is that all about?
Registration is a public notification system. Both fixed and floating charges have to be registered with the official corporate registrar in the UK, that's Companies House. It's a vital mechanism to protect the whole credit system.
So anyone can look it up.
Anyone. It ensures that any person or any bank thinking about lending money to that company can check the public register and see exactly which assets are already promised to someone else. You have to know what security is already in place before you lend.
Okay, so what if a lender messes up? They have a perfect debenture, assigned fixed charge on $1 million machine, but they forget to file the paperwork on time. What happens then?
The consequence is catastrophic. This is the legal point that catches so many people out. Failure to register a charge in a timely manner, and that legal window is incredibly strict. It renders that charge void against the liquidator.
That sounds like heavy legal jargon. What does void against the liquidator actually mean for the lender who made the mistake?
Let's simplify it. You thought you had a bodyguard, that valuable printing press standing guard over your debt. You thought you were at the very front of the line.
Right, VIP access.
Exactly, but because you didn't register, the law pretends that bodyguard never existed. Your debt is automatically demoted to being an unsecured debt.
So you lose your priority, you lose your security, and you just get thrown in the queue with everyone else, waiting for scraps.
Precisely. When the liquidator sells off all the assets, the money first goes to certain preferential creditors, like employee wages, and then to the properly registered secured creditors. Only after they are all paid in full does any leftover money get shared out among the unsecured creditors.
And there's usually not much left over.
Often, nothing. The lender who failed to register might recover pennies on the dollar or nothing at all. That procedural step is just as important as the value of the asset itself.
That is genuinely fascinating. It really shows that debt isn't just a financial relationship. It's a rigid legal framework where administration and timing can mean success or total failure.
It also highlights the due diligence needed. A bank can do the most complex valuation of a factory, but if their legal team misses the registration deadline by one day, all that work means nothing.
So what does this all mean for you listening? We've basically given you a roadmap of corporate security and risk. The contrast between share capital, that's ownership, and risk and loan capital obligation and security is fundamental.
Right.
We've identified how fixed charges lock onto stable assets for superior security, and how floating charges allow that operational flexibility over circulating assets right up until that moment of crystallization.
And most critically,
we've established that registration is the non-negotiable legal gateway. It establishes and enforces your priority when everything goes wrong.
and if we connect all this to the bigger picture, it leads to a really interesting legal nuance. We've set out the general priority, fixed beats floating, and earlier registered beats later. But what happens when those rules clash?
You mean, if a legally registered later fixed charge comes into conflict with an earlier, also legally registered floating charge?
Precisely. Now, while the fixed charge is generally superior, that initial floating charge agreement often contains this powerful little clause called a negative pledge clause.
A negative pledge.
Yes. It's a contractual promise from the company that it will not create any later fixed charges that would rank ahead of that existing floating charge.
So the first lender tries to contractually freeze their place in the queue. They're telling the company, you can't let anyone cut in line ahead of me later on.
That's a perfect way to put it. And if a subsequent lender takes a fixed charge, but they had notice of that negative pledge clause, either they were told or they could see it in the public registration documents.
Then what?
Then that earlier registered floating charge can actually jump back ahead in the priority queue. It can retain its original seniority despite the general rule that fixed beats floating. It just shows that even the strictest rules have these fascinating layered exceptions that really decide who wins the battle for the assets. And that's a powerful nuance for you to mull over.